Hey, good morning and good evening to you.
Good morning. Well, it's not evening for me. I'm actually in Seattle.
Oh, are you? Okay. You are in the area. Excellent. Well, yeah, how are you doing this
Yep,
morning?
I'm good, good. And you?
Doing pretty well. Just barely managed by the skin of my teeth to get everything ready for Denmark that I'm leaving for in about 4 hours to head over to
Oh
the Next
yeah,
Steps conference. So, yeah.
right, exactly. You're traveling to Europe, of course. You're traveling to
Mm.
Copenhagen, or where is it? Is it? I guess it's in Legoland, so that's Billund, I
Billund.
think. But still,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'm actually really excited for that. I've not been, and I'm sure I'm going to come back with probably a check bag and some Lego sets to to build when I get home.
That is absolutely epic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm very
I'm kind
excited.
of
Good
jealous.
sh smart choice on them to do it there. Like Copenhagen was great, but the kid in me is a lot more excited to be staying in a Legoland hotel. And I they sent the presenters a picture of one of those little 3D cameras that can move around the room, and like the room is just decked out in Lego gear. The ceiling has Lego blocks on it, so like even the rooms are just like Lego themed and everything. And like the sheets are like
Um,
okay, like all right, like I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this. Yeah.
Now I understand why Will insisted
Hmm.
on me going to Chicago and him going to
Yeah.
the next step. Now I get it because of course Will is the biggest Lego nerd that I know on the team.
I think it's Will. Mike Carlo also is.
Oh yeah,
He made a trip out to Legoland last year when the conference was in Copenhagen, and now he's because it's actually there. He's even more excited. So like, yeah. But I would agree. Like Will and Mike both really like Legos, so they're
yeah,
very happy that this is happening. Yeah.
yeah. I can see that.
Oh well, there's already a healthy amount of people. I'm noticing the chat's getting all lively. A couple people from both the area and overseas. So thanks everyone for joining. Johnny, good to see you. But Jeroen, I'd love to give a little introduction about you. So I know uh, I think our initial introduction at some point was probably just over the Twitterverse and LinkedIn and everything because we're both somewhat active on social media. You've been involved with Microsoft for a few years, and I've also seen you on quite a few of the MVP calls and product releases and everything that we've had as well. And I uh,
Right,
I feel like there was just at some point where I just had the thought like, yeah, I really wanted to actually get time to chat with you and to hang out. So a lot of this
right.
is like definitely for my benefit too. I just want I'm looking forward just to hanging out for the next hour. But I also know that you have a lot of involvement with Microsoft and the product development and everything else. So. With
Right.
that being said, do you want to give yourself a little introduction to people tuning in and a little background about yourself?
Sure. First off, isn't it weird that you feel like you know a person you have never seen them before,
Yeah,
right?
a little bit,
Like,
yeah, especially because of social media.
yeah. So it's like really, I don't know what's happening to my camera, by the way. It's just going blurry on my end. But anyway, I'll just keep talking. Uh, no, it's really weird. I
Voice is
mean,
still
you
good.
work with people. Okay, you still get the idea that you know them for like forever already. You never seen them in person, and I definitely had it last week in Chicago on the Data Insight Summit. That you just you know a couple of people from the community so well, or at least you think you know them so well because you're active interact with them on Twitter and on other social media so many times already, and that's then the first time you actually see them in real life, right? So, for example, Alex Powers, I've never seen him, right, in real life until last week, like or
Oh, I
no,
didn't know
a couple
that.
days ago actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So I met him on Sunday night. That was the first time ever I met him. Um, and the same for basically everybody that was there. So apart from Amanda, of course, who lives in the same town as I do, so I knew her already. Anyway, I'm Jay, or officially I'm Jeroen, but I go by Jay to make it easier for everybody. Um, I'm a PM on the Power BI team. Um, you might know me from social media and from the blog. I'm pretty active there. Within the team, sometimes people get the impression that I own everything. The problem with me is I have an opinion on everything, but I don't own everything. So I have an opinion on just about everything under the sun. But I own modeling and DAX. So I share the modeling and DAX space with Emily, who is a new PM on the team, relatively new.
Hmm.
So she's focused on a specific part of modeling that we can potentially talk about. But we basically share the modeling and DAX space together. So I go into DAX, I go into a couple core modeling features, and then basically whatever else is lying around that people think like, hey, we need somebody else to PM it. I run that too. So I'm working on basically my focus is on modeling, and then whatever else is just there that people need help on. So I did the network-based functions in DAX, for example, right? So now you can do in DAX, you can now do
Yep.
network-based
That was a
to
popular
calculate the
release for a new function. Yep.
right, exactly. So that's just one out of my hat. Um, so whenever you see an improvement in DAX, I've been involved. Um, and when you see improvements in, for example, I don't know if you saw the RLS editor in Datamarts, the one with the drop downs.
Yeah, I saw
You
some
don't
tweets and
have to like.
screenshots of that. Yeah.
So that's another one from where I worked on. So yeah, that's basically me. I'm originally from the Netherlands. I moved to US in 2018, December. Um, so been here, let's say 3 years, a little bit. Um, yeah, and just enjoying the ride.
Yeah, and like by your description of just kind of bouncing around a lot, it gives me parallels of just my conversation with Chuck before he retired, and owning that, like, where he managed to wear 1,000 hats and often do a job of enough people that I'd like, how do you even have time for anything sometimes? But he was a very versatile Swiss Army knife of skills, and it seems like you've had to dabble in a lot of different arenas within the Power BI space for managing various products and subproducts and features.
Yeah, yeah. So if I can aspire to having that kind of impact in my career, I would immediately sign up for that, as
And
Chuck
then you
had
can retire in
specifically.
your 50s and go on a fishing boat in Florida and just never look back.
Right, and also, I mean, I have this weird. Before I moved to the US and became part of the product team, I had this weird like dream that I wanted to be like at some point be gray and old and go like, you know, that button in that product does what it does because I said it should be so, right? So I basically said make it so, and I just have this childish dream that that will sometime happen to me, and it's happening already. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm happy. I'm a happy camper. I can definitely retire if I had the money to retire, but not yet. So you'll be stuck with me for a couple more years if that's okay.
Getting there, yeah. Well, I'm actually like, and I'm looking at some of them right now. I'm getting a couple of good questions. Let me queue up some of these. If you don't mind, I can pass a couple off to you. And let's
Sure.
see, let's do at least some introductory ones. So, Didier, I'm gonna pop yours up for now. He wanted to, or he's commenting on the fact that there seems to be a major update of the model compatibility level 1600. Could you give some insights or information about the changes?
Um, I can't give everything away right now um, because what's happening here is we're building stepping stones towards a larger goal that we will definitely talk about in this call. I think because people have been asking for that already.
Yeah.
But we're building towards that. So what is happening currently in the product and also in the AS engine, we're building those stepping stones into the product, but we're not entirely ready to completely like open up everything and talk about it. What is happening is, for example, um, with translations, we needed an upgrade in the engine, right? So now you can, in proxy models, sorry, I'm using the internal name, the composite models over Power BI datasets, right? The feature previously known as direct query for Power BI datasets and
Mm-hmm.
analysis services, the crazy long name. Uh, the composite model feature on Power BI datasets, you can now do translations on items and potential customizations even. And we needed a way to track that and make sure that we have that actually flagged that if, for example, we created an upstream model and adds a
Mm-hmm.
customization, and I have also created a customization on the exact same object. If you update your customization, what will happen, right? How can we match those two things together? Is that like, so we added a flag. So that's where you see those increments coming. I'm not sure why this has resulted in a major update to 1600. I was kind of thinking it would be like a smaller one. So I'm not entirely sure what's happening, but my guess is it's actually the building blocks of, the feature that we're going to talk about
Okay, so that'll
in
be
the
like
next step.
1601 or like something in the 16 in the 600 block though. Okay.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Hmm. Excellent. Thank you for that. Good to see
Sure.
you on as well, Didier. Let's see okay, and I did get a follow-up. So there was one other interesting question that I had, and I wanted some elaboration on this before I popped it onto the screen. But somebody was curious about like basically additional time intelligence, and when I asked for clarification, I at least did get some additional points for like hours, minutes, seconds. Okay, so basically like yeah, and because when I say time intelligence, I really mean date intelligence most part. This is true time intelligence like functions and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an interesting one. We actually talked about this a couple days ago, um, and we came to the same conclusion. Like, actually, if you look at it like from what the word actually means, time intelligence is a misnomer, right? It's actually data intelligence. um,
Yep.
and so yeah, we definitely recognize the need that you would want to, especially for example in manufacturing or IoT based scenarios where there's events coming in, like you want to be able like, hey, how many events did we have in the same hour a week ago, right? And then or a week ago, but then shifted an hour
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, right? And those kind of things are just missing. You can do, of course, all of that using like interesting like tricks, but
Yep.
yeah, we definitely recognize the need for more support here. Um, Not just for hours, minutes, and seconds, but also the one new thing that I've seen commonly is milliseconds. Like people actually wanting to do event-based analytics. And then milliseconds start becoming important in some businesses, like stock trading, right? Like what
Yeah.
happened
Okay.
here exactly to the millisecond? And if you start diving into that, you notice that the AS engine doesn't support that. It just compares times on the to the second level, not to milliseconds.
And I want to also like emphasize that back as well. Like Power BI is a great reporting tool, but it's as you're kind of saying, it's not really built to be that fast acting to the millisecond level. Like there are other platforms designed to run scripts to do X when Y happens when when one
Yes.
millisecond of something changes. Like, but that's not that level of power. And even I would say down to the second. I have a lot of clients who do time, and God forbid you have a date time table. You should not have one with both because that's an insane number of rows. You split it up. You have a date dimension table, and when I even then like the timetable often is not down to the second level. Like some clients do need that data, but I ask like, so what is the true lowest detail you need? Like, do you actually need minute, or do you care like in a 1 hour block? Like
Right.
you just want to know 24 rows, 1 hour per day, and most of the time that I build time,
Yeah.
it's usually to the hour level, and it's aggregated to that. And at that
Yeah.
point, you have a 24 row dimension table. Your key is basically just 1 through 24 or something like that. But uh, it's always my
Yeah.
encouragement to push back. It's the same thing with people who want real-time data. Well, do you really need this, or do you need like 5 or 6 refreshes per day against that? And like how large is your data set? So they're great things that the clients often think they need. It's the rock scenario, but you have to educate them on what exactly they're asking and the implications that comes with that to deliver something that is only as complex as it needs to be, rather than adding every bell and whistle just because you can, not because you should.
Sure. Sure. I agree with that. Although I'll say that even if you don't do the real time thing, it can still be useful sometimes in some
Sure,
cases. For
sure.
example, in the manufacturing situation, that you want to be able to
Mhm.
analyze, okay, what happened 10 seconds ago, right? Or what's the average number of incidents we had with a
Yep.
certain sensor saying something in the last 35 seconds or 45 seconds. And then we actually started seeing cases where there was timestamps with milliseconds. And then we started um, trying to figure out what AS actually does. And I think what we ended up in, but I might be wrong, and Jeffrey Wang will definitely know. But I think what it was, if you have 3 seconds and 2 milliseconds, or 3 seconds and
Hmm.
1 millisecond, AS will treat them as equal.
Okay. Okay.
And that's a thing we have to solve, because if people start pushing in milliseconds as well and want to then to do, hey, how many of these events did we have over the last 500 milliseconds? And AS just says,
Gotcha.
oh, that's just 1 second. That's not true.
Okay. So like for
So that's
counts
where we
or
need to
anything else, you're like it's essentially keying them together when
exactly.
it okay. Interesting.
So that's something we have
Yeah.
to look into, and we need to start building some support for. But going back to that same question, yeah, absolutely. Time intelligence is kind of a misnomer. It's data intelligence. So yeah, we should definitely consider doing something with hours. But that would also imply you would have to work at time zones, right? It's a connected world. It's a global
Yep.
world these days. So time zones is then necessarily becoming a next step, right? It's great that you can calculate things over hours and minutes and seconds, but what is the time zone? And maybe you want to do time zones translations as well. So that opens up a whole box of Pandora of things that we will have to add to the product. So yes, it's definitely on the list. It's definitely somewhere in that list of 110 items that I keep just for my area. And you can imagine how many items there are if all of the PMs keep their own list of approximately 100 items. It's in that list, but
Okay.
what that
Okay.
list is from there we go shorten it and shorten it, and we try to get like support from other PMs to then push for that, right? So that's, for example, where I need Christian Wade to help me. And then if we both agree that, let's say, real time intelligence, so hours,
Yep.
minutes, seconds, milliseconds, is worthwhile, then chances increase that we would actually start building that.
And
But yeah,
bringing up, I think as well, the conversation that we had last week, but the one of my biggest still today, like pet peeves with date time and dates and everything in Power BI, and it's like it's one of my favorite videos that I have because every comment below this, you know the one I'm talking about, I think, is it's like this saved my life. Like I have been struggling with this, and it's the fact that date time and date are not separate data types in Power BI, but Power BI Desktop identifies them as such. And if you change from
yes.
date to text or from text to number, it is a conversion. It actually converts the data type. Date time to date formats it. It does not remove it. So the issue is, and it's hard to, not most people do not encounter a scenario where they import date time, convert it to date in the model. Normally it's done in Power Query, but for that rare moment that people do that, you can never key back to a date table because technically all the time elements are still into there, so the keys are mismatched. They don't actually work, and
Yes.
nothing about the UI indicates this. And the first time I saw it, it took me a few days, and I had to ask other MVPs. Oh yeah, it's because of this. It basically formats it. So I'm continuously ping every few months the email thread that I have with Jeffrey Wang and a few others. But it's like, when's the UI gonna like prompt people? By the way, this is formatting. This is not converting. If you need to convert, please go to Power Query. So I'm hoping something like that eventually comes out. The UI changes to educate people, but I feel like it's a red herring for individuals because the
Yep.
UI is just it's not working as it should to educate people on what's happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that exact item, we have a link to the email thread that you just mentioned, and I think also a Twitter thread somewhere is on
Yeah.
that same list. And it literally just reads um, date and date time mismatch, data type, relationship, something. Like, and I think it just literally mentions your name as well. Like, hey, this guy reported it. So you're famous on in that regard. No, I mean I see that's an issue. The problem here is so there's basically two broad ways in which we can improve the product or solve problems. We can slap on like a band-aid to, for this specific scenario, give an error if you do that, or somehow say, hey, this won't work. Do you want us to convert this so it will work? Do you want us to convert it here in Power Pivot, like in the AS model? Sure. Or do you want it to convert it in Power Query, right? Do you want us to add a step to the query so it's converted there?
Hmm.
That's an option. But immediately, that's what I call a band aid. The better thing, I think, as a product owner, to do is actually think about this in a more generic sense.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
are there scenarios in which we can improve the relationship creation experience to help you avoid these problems? Because there's other problems that people see. For example, you create a relationship between two columns that have the same data type. So here the mismatched data type is not coming into play. But the one
Yeah.
column is A to Z and the A to F, and the other one is G to Z, right? There's zero. The data type is correct, but there's zero overlap.
Well, the date time
User
table is
information.
the date table still has a date time column. It's just every date is just what is it 12 a.m. I think is the
Yeah, yeah,
timestamp next to
yeah,
it. So
yeah.
like you said,
I
like
agree.
there isn't a date time. Sorry, there isn't a data type mismatch technically because they both are. But I think you pose a good
Right.
question on. There are many different ways to solve the issue in terms of the UI redesign, but it's how should it be done? Either way, it does have to be done in Power Query. The end result is the person
Yes,
does need to go in there. It's just whether or not do you tell them to do it themselves, or do you add the auto
can we
step like any of
automate
the other
that and
ones
make
would
it?
do? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so I'm thinking about this exact problem that you just posed in a more generic sense. Like
Hmm.
there's also situations in which the data type match perfectly fine. There's no formatting problem, but it's just that the data in itself doesn't overlap. Should we inform you about that?
Yeah,
Should we
that would
also
be
tell
nice.
you maybe about the cardinality of the relationship? Like, hey, for example, if we go back to the composite models
Hmm.
on Power BI data sets, if you create a cross source group relationship there, that cardinality, so the number of unique values on the sides of the relationship, needs to be below 25, uh, what is it, 25,000, 25, no, 250,000,
Okay.
um, for us to guarantee performance, right? Should we tell you if you drag a cross source group relationship onto the screen, you create that and the cardinality is too high, should we inform you? Well, again, we can put up a band-aid and said, hey, it's above 250,000. You created a cross source group relationship. We cannot guarantee it will work. Are you sure this is what you want? Or we can go into the better, I think, again, better strategy of saying, hey, maybe we should show you the cardinality of all relationships, even if it's not a cross source group. So at least you know what you're doing. And then if you see, like, I'm trying to match my date dimension with a fact table, but the cardinality of the date dimension is only 2. There's something wrong in the data load, right? Because I expected years of data, so I at least need
Yep.
365 days in a year, right? Hey, this cardinality is shown as 2. That's something weird. So that would actually help you figure that out before you
Hmm.
even created the relationship, and then later figure out that the report doesn't work, right? So that's basically how I approach these kind of problems. I go like, yeah, that's a point solution, but adding point solution would just only, like slapping on a band-aid, would only confuse the product in the end. So that's where I then go into like, okay, so what does this mean on a generic level?
I think you mentioned this to me. Like, when was the last time any of the code base has been updated for like the relationship building stuff?
Relationship has been fairly recent because we made changes to that for data marts, right? So for data marts, if you look at the
True.
relationship dialogue in data marts versus desktop, that's not, like, it's not entirely the same experience, right?
Yep.
Um, so that's been fairly recent. But the one we talked about earlier, before this stream, was the data grid, like the data view. So you
Or the
have the
the data
report
view.
view,
Yeah,
you have
that's
the
right.
model
That's
view.
right.
That hasn't been touched in 2016.
It's been a minute. Yep.
Yeah, that has been, and that needs work because there's things we can do. For example, Power Query has great statistics, right? You can look at a
Oh,
column and go like, this is the distribution.
the
Yeah,
profiling. Yeah, like something like that in the data grid. Or honestly, like there's a lot of Power Query features that I think could to your relationship thing too. Just like if you can drag and drop, it has a little that little like managed relationship pop up where it shows matched at the bottom. Maybe per the first 1,000 rows, you could potentially do a profile against all of it just to see, oh, this is a 98% match or something like that.
yeah, exactly. So those are then the things that I start thinking about, start
Yep.
specking out, making PowerPoint mock-ups of, and then people scream at me that I'm overcomplicating things. But this is basically my work as a PM. So,
Yep.
so I mean, it's good, it's great, and it's great that we, for example, we want to take the data view forward, right? We want to see
Hmm.
what we can improve about it, and then you start looking at what people think and the things that people say, and then again, band-aids all over the place, but band-aids don't solve the core issue, right? And then
Yep.
you need to think about, okay, how do we actually make a significant improvement here, um, rather than slapping on a band-aid and making it look a little bit prettier, because you know you could put, one of the my favorite sayings is, you can put makeup on a monkey but still a monkey.
Exactly. Uh, Out of curiosity, like, has there ever been times though where like a band-aid is quick, a longer improvement might be a year or two, so you still slap the band-aid on, just because it's something you can get out the door next month while a broader stroke redesign can be implemented.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That happens a lot, and it's a strategy. We can absolutely do it. Um, the issue is that the band aid is not. I mean, just for example, in the scenario that you just described, like with
Mhm.
datetime format and date format, where
Yep.
this doesn't match, you would say probably, oh man, that's just 2 lines of code. You just call a dialog creator. When this happens, show this message.
Yep.
That's the band-aid. It's not that easy because we need to get the UI design. We need to get the text strings so it's not confusing. So that needs to go to content design. It needs to be localized. It needs to be,
Yep.
we don't want to expose any personal information in there that you might not want to show on the screen because you might be sharing the data with somebody else. So just for a simple dialogue, that just takes us loads of time. We're building this software at an enterprise level at the Microsoft scale. We have to take everything into account. So even for a simple dialogue, that will probably take months before that's there. So
And that's
should we
not
not
even
just then?
considering if you had to write a Power Query step, because Power Query is an entirely separate team that manages that. So then you'd
Right.
have to work with them to update their code base to allow you to pass a new applied step to them, which I'm sure would add
Right.
even more
I
time
don't think
versus
even
simply
that
just a UI
API.
pop-up. Yeah.
Right. I don't think even that API that allows us to send them a step to add to a certain query exists. Like that doesn't exist. So that integration point for us to do the right thing, which is,
Hmm.
hey, this is broken. Do you want us to fix it for you automatically? Which implies us sending a step to a certain query in Power Query and attaching it to it. That thing doesn't exist. We cannot just that for that to be built will require an API design, will require a security design, will require because it changes the potential attack surface, as we call it, that people have against a product. So there's loads of complexity behind all of that. So yes, Band-Aid sounds simple, but to be honest, sometimes, or in many cases, the amount of effort you need to put in for a Band-Aid is approximately the same
Yeah.
as the full solution. Because of everything you need to do to make that tiny thing happen, those everything you need to do are fixed cost. So if that tiny thing is tiny, that's approximately the same cost. If that tiny thing blows up into a great solution, those costs stay approximately the same. So then you go like, so either I work for a Band-Aid for 2 months or I work on the right solution for 3 months.
Yeah. When the overall cost isn't that different, absolutely. But like you said, it's because the number of people, teams, and everything else involved, usually, and the number of places where you have to update or add code or new commands just to even allow for something like this. Yeah.
Yep. So, that's maybe a little bit of a insight into how this software development process works, where that will just take time. It's not that we didn't hear you. It's not that I don't want to do that. I absolutely think this is very frustrating and it's annoying and we need to fix it. Um, but also, and the other aspect here, of course, is how do I choose how to prioritize these things? Of course, the other aspect is um, if we do this, that means that something else does not get done because our resources are limited. The sky is not the limit at Microsoft. Um, so is there something then that we have to kill which actually will bring in more money or more users? Because, to be honest, the problem you're describing doesn't add any new user. If we fix this,
Yep.
it
Yep.
will delight people, but it will not add more money into the bank. Right?
Well,
And
yeah,
that's
exactly.
another
And like,
aspect.
yeah, because there is a little bit of it. It's a cost in, cost out perspective. Is this thing that we're adding, is this going to make our current base happier? Is it going to add new people to our base? Is it going to allow people to migrate, say maybe from another platform? These are just some things that at least I can
Yes.
think of are considerations. Uh,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah, and at least my understanding from talking to a few individuals is I know with certain teams, even within like the Power BI space or even certain Microsoft softwares, like there's not unlimited resources for limited developers to do all of this. So like there's always a much longer list from my understanding of things to be done than there is time and resources. So it's like you said, like we are aware of a lot of this stuff, but prioritization sometimes has to happen. And it's sometimes the priority that you guys want, it's sometimes the priority that upper management wants. But either way,
Yeah,
the prioritization has to
yeah,
make everyone happy.
right. So, I mean, I've got a list of 100 items I would like to do. Out of that, I need to go back to 20 items. Otherwise, we cannot even start the conversation. And then out of those 20, if I'm lucky, I get 5 every half year. So that's basically, so we go from 100 to 5 items if I'm lucky that I can actually execute on in half a year. Right?
Yep.
So that's basically to kind of understand. So that's how slowly we will be able to deliver all of that. It's not that we didn't hear you. It's not that we don't want to do it. It's just the reality of the situation that we're in. And also, I have people say like, yeah, but Microsoft is rich and you can just hire new people. Yes, of course we can. And no, we don't. We cannot just hire magically go because Reed said something. Oh, we'll just hire 50 new engineers, right? We have the money for that. No, that's not how this works. But
Yeah.
fine, even if we imagine we had unlimited money and budgets, which we don't, even then, that wouldn't help. Because the people that we hire need at least a year before they are onboarded onto our code base to solve these kind of problems. And for some harder problems, we have estimated that it takes 2 years. So even if I
Oh
hire
wow. Okay. Yeah.
person XYZ today, that person can absolutely do a couple things right away, but it will take them a
Mhm.
year before we can give them like hard problems. And it will take them 2 years before we can give them the hardcore problems, like the ones that
Yep.
we like, the real tough stuff. So also keep that in mind, right? So there's a lead time there when we hire new people.
The rule of thumb that I've even given people too, because I mean, it's now built into the industry where you need to maximize whatever your lifetime earnings are. Like it's never gonna most of the time happen at one company anymore. You're gonna probably go to 3 or 4 different companies at least in your life and move around. But anytime anyone has ever asked me like how long to stay at a company, I said like at least like if you are truly wanting to both get value for yourself and the company gets value out of you, like at least 2 years, just because like you just said, even after the first year, if you're getting hired into I would say a standard analyst or any higher position, it takes a long time to ramp you up. There's a sunk cost that the company has to pay for that. So you don't truly get into a groove of anything if you are planning to like stay for a while but not forever. I think 2 years is kind of the respectable amount of time, unless like something horrible ends up happening with that relationship. But otherwise, I think
Yeah,
that's
sure.
like to me that respectable minimum to at least attempt to stay with the company that long before even considering going anywhere else.
And of course, things happen, and the
Well, yeah,
match
yeah,
might not be there, or
yep,
other reasons, right?
yeah,
It happens a
circumstances,
lot, but
yeah, yep,
yeah. But I mean, and I, by the way, was saying that I don't want to like disregard the quality of the people that we hire, right? I mean, everybody
mm-hmm.
that I work with is highly qualified, highly skilled, and highly motivated. Um, but just because you're a great software engineer doesn't mean you know everything there is to know to write great software at Microsoft for this particular product,
Oh yeah,
right? Even if you've been a software engineer at Microsoft for years, Power BI has just been built different from the chances are the Power BI is being built differently from what you're used to, and you just need time to like re-educate yourself and get into the core of how that works. Um, so one thing that I find very interesting, for example, if somebody is being added to the AS Engine team on the DAX side, um, one of the first assignments is taking one of the Excel DAX function, the Excel formulas, and adding them to DAX. Hey, that's how we got net workdays.
yeah,
And that's how we got the financial formulas. Because
mm-hmm,
what are
mm-hmm.
we doing? And I can let you into a little secret. We actually don't write any new code, except that we just call the Excel DLL that is responsible for calculating net workdays. We slap that in, and then we call it, and that's all we do.
Okay, okay. So I mean, why rebuild the wheel if the wheel is accessible to use, right?
Exactly. And so
Yep.
that also means, by the way, if there's any bug in net workdays in Excel, we will have the same bug.
Hey, at least you could be like, hey, like, so this is calculating correctly. Not our fault. Go talk to the go talk to the Excel team.
Right, exactly. But that's
Yep.
that's an onboarding project that we use for people to
Okay.
get like go find their way in the code base. Right? It's
Yep.
relatively simple. You just need to call this function from this DLL and pass in some parameters. go find your way in the code base and build that. So whenever you see, so the next time you'll see a random, or apparently random, it's not entirely random because I made a prioritized list, but one function suddenly, or a group of functions suddenly being added to DAX, that means there is a new engineer that has just onboarded.
Exactly. There was a really good question, I think, to our conversation earlier that I want to bring up from Matthias. So, like, it's the fact that there are a lot of teams and components to work with, even within the Microsoft space. So, he was curious about how does the process go to get all these teams to work together towards a common vision, considering that there's so many different components involved.
I mean, in general, most of that just goes back to our management who's very good at creating like one shared vision and one, well, it's not marching orders, but they lay out the land, right? Here's where we want to go. Here's where we strategically in the coming years want to go towards. These are your goals. These are your goals as a team. That's being set by management and of course with input from us. But in the end, like overall on the level of Arun, for example, that's basically the overall strategy that's being set. And then from there, we take concrete goals like we want to grow the number of users, or we want to build feature XYZ because we feel like there's a gap, right? So we want to catch up, or we want to improve on the market, we want to innovate on the market in a certain space. And that all then starts slowly aligning every team towards that common goal. Every team has their own room to do things outside of that goal, though, right? So there's loads of wiggle room for us to go like, well, yes, we'll work on that goal, but we'll also do this because of blah, blah, blah reason. For example, performance, sheer performance, how many milliseconds does it take to do something, has been a core item on the Power BI desktop team. Now, the Power Query team has focused in different directions and has done, I mean, I'm not going to blame them or whatever, but the performance of that engine is just not the same as the ACE engine, right? So chances are they might actually say for a semester at some point, to go like, yeah, sure, we'll build all these new cool features, but we'll also take performance on as a thing that we want to invest more in. I'm not saying they didn't invest enough or whatever, but they can, a team can change that balance, right? And then of course there's the ground items, like the basic items. Everything needs to be secure. Everything needs to be accessible, right? For people with disabilities and whatever disability that may be. Everything needs to be localized. Everything needs to be like not offensive to anybody, right? I mean, if we say something about a country existing, yes or no, we need to check whether or not everybody agrees that it's actually a country. So all those interesting things come into play, but those are fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
And so that's there all the time. So it's security, like speed of development, making sure that everything is okay. And then from there on, you take the things that have been given you from above and your interpretation of that, which of course we aligned. And then you have another bucket, which is these are the things that I, as a PM, or we as a group want to do because we think it's the right thing. Yes, it aligns to the goal, but it wasn't necessarily called for in that goal, but we still think it's very important. So yeah, that's basically how this works. So there's loads of planning going around every half year. We do this and dance. Of course, the overall vision doesn't change, luckily, every half year.
Hopefully not. That's a fast-moving target at that point.
Yeah, but definitely the way we interpret it changes over the years, and the way the things we focus on changes over the years. And then we set ourselves goals for every half year, like, hey, or every year, here's where we want to grow to, this is what we want to do. And that then boils down into me coming up with a list of features that I would like to do to help move that goal forward.
Well, I like your description as well of the fact that like between desktop and Power Query, like you're thinking of like features and stuff that's in the milliseconds in terms of reaction time versus Power Query, I'd say, is seconds to minutes. Like it's expected that those queries are going to run for a while, and like most of the time, it doesn't need to get nearly as granular for that. So like even performance in terms of time and reaction are at different scales. So what's something that's more
Yes.
prioritized for you guys might not as be prioritized for them. So you have to find a common ground between those two. It
Right,
also,
exactly.
yeah, and it, funny enough, it reminds me of the story of Power Pivot. I guess way back in the days, the Excel team refused to have it turned on by default. To my understanding from talking to Rob, back when he was developing it, is because they didn't want a single toggle that made it longer to load Excel. They don't want anything else to increase the time for Excel to open, and having Power Pivot on by default does do that. So it was something you had to go manually turn on if you've never used it before. And I, so like it's teams with different priorities, right? Because you have the Power Pivot team, which was more like SSAS, and you had the Excel team, and different prioritizations of features and limitations.
Yep. No, and that's something that happens all the time. Everybody has their
Hmm.
own priority, and um, yeah, I mean, there are rules in place that for in certain teams, for example, with Excel, it's a great example, which might not make actually loads of sense to somebody else, right? So we might go like, yeah, but this is great innovation, great technology. We want to ship that to everybody, and Excel is the right place. What we did with Power Pivot, and then Excel said, no, 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 that's not going to happen because we have this rule in place, right? So that's yeah, those things happen. You also see that in experiences, like, hey, you might want to um, cuddle up with us to be shipped as like a group together or present yourself as a group, like for example the power platform, right? Across the power platform there's agreements on how things work,
Hmm. Hmm.
so we cannot just go and suddenly go like, oh, but we're going to do, I don't know, or something that just suddenly changes the whole UI and the way the UI works, because the Power Platform as a thing has sudden base level agreements on how
Yep.
these things operate and where people can find stuff. Otherwise, it would be completely confusing and feel like a disjointed experience. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So yeah, it's an interesting puzzle with multiple moving facets.
That was a good deep dive into that. Good question that I think flourished some fun talks between the two of us. I do just have a call out that I actually think would be, because we've had a lot of really good discussions so far and some great questions in the chat. But um, somebody who tuned in just now was wondering, has there been any basically demos or examples of some data modeling or other stuff? So I'm wondering if you have anything we could potentially like show or actually talk about to see some like hands-on things related to data modeling practices or anything else.
Well, we just had the Data Insights Summit,
No.
and Amanda and I did a keynote there where we talked about a whole bunch of things. Um, so that keynote has been recorded.
Hmm.
As far as I know, it has been recorded. I'm not sure if it's published already. I would encourage everybody to go watch that, because there's at least 4 or 5 items in there that don't not necessarily are all related to data modeling, but are very interesting. And some of them, I think 4 or 5 of them you've never seen before. So go watch that whenever that's live. Data Insight Summit, go find it. So that's one. Then on that same event, I had a session which was called Improvements to the Calculations in Power BI, or Improving Calculations in Power BI. Um, and that's where I shared a vision of where we can take creation of calculations in Power BI. Right? So today you write DAX, but let's be honest. I mean, the way we write DAX, okay, how do you write your DAX, Reed? How do you write your DAX?
Very carefully until the number is right. But yeah, it's something where honestly, like it's half free script, but I also have learned from using Tabular Editor 2, I'm very reliant on the IntelliSense. Like with any scripting language,
Yeah,
you don't realize how much you need that until it goes away. And you're like, oh yeah, that was a very big like support of everything that I've written. But yeah, I'd
yeah,
say it's like it's half off my brain, and then the other half of the gaps get filled in with IntelliSense, usually when I write those
right,
things.
right. And then you keep tweaking it and keep tweaking it until
Hmm.
you go like, yeah, this might actually make sense, and this is probably what I want. Um, so you can summarize Control C, right? Oversimple, right? People
Yep,
copy something, they paste it, and they go like, oh, I hope it works.
exactly.
So And we've been thinking about like what can we do to make that situation better for the last 1.5, almost 2 years now. And that's what I shared on the Data Insight Summit. And that's a direction that we are looking into taking, which is called visual calcs, or that's short for visual calculations. So it basically thinks about, can we make DAX easier, and can we solve the hardest thing in DAX, which is filter context and context transition. That's
Yep.
where people trip themselves up. The complexity of having to write a measure inside of the context of the data model, and everything that can happen with filters and relationships coming in, and how people might use your measure, that makes it completely complex. That makes it very hard to write a good measure and still keep it performant. So we've
Yep.
been thinking
Agreed.
about saying, hey, what about if we allowed you to do a calculation not inside the model, but instead just on the visual? So we would give you a DAX
Hmm.
calculation engine that sits just on the visual, and you just work with the little data that's like the little sandbox, if you will, of the data that's on the visual. And that has obvious benefits because all the filter context has already happened, right?
Yep.
The visual knows exactly the data points it needs to paint itself onto the screen. Those are the data points you're going to work with. Great. So filter context is out. Great. Other benefit, your visual, if it shows, for example, sales over the last 2 weeks, that will just be 14 rows and 2 columns, right? A
Hmm.
day
Hmm.
and a sales amount. So that will be 28 cells that we have to work with to build that visual on the screen. Your calculation, if you wanted to do, let's say, a moving average over the last 2 days over sales, that can happily happen over those 28 rows,
Yep.
28 cells. Because that's all you need. You don't need to go to the lowest level of detail to calculate every single order and calculate the moving average over all of that. No, you can answer your business question of what's the moving average of my sales over the last 2 days using those exact 28 cells. Now tell me, do you think AS Engine will be able to handle any DAX calculation over 28 cells and do that in a performant manner?
I mean,
I
well,
guess so.
and I, yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure still how the engine is going to handle those exactly, but I mean, you basically you have a subquery that is taking the query context, everything on the page.
Yeah,
And it produces a result, and then from there, those resulted calculations are being calculated. So I mean, it's well, and the parallel that that somebody actually asked earlier is like InfoRiver has done something with this earlier, where uh, they have some visual level calcs where it pre-calculates from the data first, and then after that
yes,
data has been cached and saved, it's very fast to do additional calculations because you're just taking 50 million rows to 500 rows. So yes, you are doing
right,
additional calculations, but it's not going back to the source. It's just calculating on top of what is already cached in the result. So,
correct.
the
So that's basically how
yeah,
this works. So
yep,
think about this as an extra entry point into
mm-hmm,
the pipeline of getting data from the source all the way to painting a visual on the screen, right? So all the way from getting data to the source on
yep,
to the point that we can
exactly,
actually show you the bar chart or whatever. That's what we call a pipeline. Right now with measures, you can do calculations, but they're kind of early in the pipeline. They happen after the data has been retrieved, but it happens on the unaggregated data.
yes,
So with
exactly,
visual calculations, we're saying, hey, but additionally, give you a point to do a calculation after the data has been retrieved and
yep,
aggregated and cleaned, everything else. After it's done, right before, like the step before it's being painted onto the screen, hey, do you want to do a calculation here?
mm-hmm,
Right? And that's basically what we're considering building. Um,
yeah, that's awesome,
so, and and not only that, because we also know that typical business type calculations are very hard, right? The example I like a lot is a running sum, right? To a manager who might ask you as
yep,
a DAX consultant or a Power BI consultant to build a running sum, they don't understand that they can do a running sum by just pointing and clicking and dragging and dropping a couple buttons in Excel and they're done. And the leading the leading BI tool in the market, which is Power BI, cannot do this without hours and hours and hours of work. 21 steps, right?
yep,
That's
yeah,
20
yeah,
steps too many.
to do a running. Well, like I mean, you could use a quick measure or something to get that in there, but
Sure.
there's not it's not a one-click button, and like there is multiple steps of DAX code that are needed to do that. There is no single function to say running total all time. There are year-to-date ones, there are time intelligence ones, but
Yes.
nothing that is a all-time cumulative forever. I know like
For
Rob Colley
example,
likes to call it
or
the greatest. What is the greatest formula in the world? It was his like,
right.
label for that running, but it still is a formula that you have to write. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that's also another ingredient that we're thinking about changing. And then the
Mhm.
other thing is, what if you don't want to write any DAX? Right? Can we give you a way in which you feel more comfortable, maybe coming from the Excel world, where you could say, hey, I don't want to, I don't know what this lab, I'm willing to at least help me build these kind of calculations without me having
Yep.
to resort to this, what I find weird functional names and parameters that I need to pass in. I don't understand any of that, but I see my data and I know what I want to do. I can indicate what I want to do by clicking on it. So all of that went into a big thinking session of the last, what is it, almost 2 years, with people like Jeffrey Wang, Marius Dumitru, John Volner, and others.
Yep.
Basically, the big guys, and then myself in the little corner of the room trying to make sense of what they're going to and thinking about it, and me writing it down. So imagine, like, make a mental picture of that, right? Like grown-ups talking, and then me in a room like trying to keep track. That's how I felt sometimes, because the people I just mentioned, they're like, wow, okay.
Well, having Jeffrey on like last year was awesome, but like it's kind of like being in a room with Marco as well. Just I'm just gonna eat my
Yeah,
popcorn and just know that I'll absorb about half of what you say, but I'm still gonna learn something.
right, exactly. And that's how I felt over the last 1.5 years working with these people, because I had to make sense of it at the end. So at the
Yep.
end, I needed to write down, make sure that I got what they said right. I'm of course oversimplifying things and joking, but so maybe we can quickly show a screenshot of that. I won't do the full
Yeah.
demo, but maybe we can quickly show a quick screenshot of what we were thinking about. So here we have a Power BI desktop environment. And what I did here is I opened what we like to call, what we think about now as the Visual Calcs editing mode. So what I did is I went from a visual into a mode in which I can add a calculation onto my visual. So what you see is you see the visual here on top. And then you see a formula bar, and you see what we call the Visual Calc matrix, the visual matrix. So the mental model here is you can represent any visual in Power BI as a matrix. It might be a matrix in itself, but a bar chart or a column chart or line chart or whatever can always be represented as a matrix. So we're basically showing you the underwater data that we needed to show you that visual that's on top, right? So that's how you need to read the screen. Visual on
Mm-hmm.
top, visual matrix at the bottom. In the middle, there's what we call a DAX editor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you can see here is that the actual data in the table in the visual originally was week num, day, total sales, and total product cost. They all came from the model. And then we slapped on two visual calcs, which we call profit and RS profit. And we're right now looking at a running sum for the profit, where we start the calculation of the running sum at the first day of week 15, and we keep going until we end week 15. This was configured that it was ending after Saturday, so Sunday starts a new week. So we keep summing the profit for that whole week, and then we
Okay.
reset on the Monday, right? But imagine doing this in current DAX. That would be multiple lines of code.
At least, yeah. I
Here,
mean, yeah, because you have to group by week and yeah. I mean, honestly, like even off the top of my head, I don't have it. I would probably
well,
Google custom period running total. More than likely, copy code from SQL BI and paste it in, and then tweak it.
right. And that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make, is that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Why can we not give you just a function that does all of that for you? So here, what I have is I've got what I call the running sum function. So here, there's a running sum function that I can actually just call and say, hey, here's here's the running sum, and I want to run this running sum over profit, and I want to reset it by lowest parent. That's something that we're considering doing, which is basically lowest parent means on the direction in which this calculation runs, which is vertically. It can in a bar chart only go this way, and a matrix can go both ways.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's always going top down. So on this thing, this is the axis that it runs over. What's the highest parent, which is weak num. So that basically means it will be restart for whenever this value changes from whatever it was to whatever it will be, right? So whenever we go from 15 to 16, then at that exact moment, we restart this calculation from 0. That's what a reset means. And then you can see how that is also being shown with like highlighting here with the cells and the line. And you can exactly see, oh wait, so that profit was actually based, until here, and then it restarted.
Yeah.
That's what this dotted line kind of implies, right? So this is what visual calcs are, or what we think visual calcs might be. They don't exist at the moment. This is all, speculation, specs, and mock-ups. There's no version of this. This is not, by the way, this is a mock-up. It's not even desktop for real. But there's loads of things to unpack here, right? It's not only that there's new functions, but actually that you have this idea of where you have a matrix that shows you that chart and the data underneath it, and then you have this updated formula bar where you have like highlighting that ties into that matrix, where you can maybe also explore optional parameters with this little plus sign, so things that you don't need to worry about, but if you want to, you could actually worry about, or you could
You
even
could
give you
expand
a
some of
way to
those
kind of
out.
like,
Oh, that's nice. Like
yeah,
you
there we go.
actually, like, so that's an interactive little thing that you have. Okay, nice.
Yes. Yeah. So hey, can we actually give you the options here and show you what that might do, right? So here's like that's considerations that we're making here. So I can switch this around. So there's loads of things in here that we will think about and move forward with. You notice maybe the FX button here, which can help us as a template. Like, you don't have to know exactly that a running sum function exists, or you don't have to know that the divide function exists if you wanted to do a percentage. We can just give you a template, and then we allow you, and I cannot expand that one, but we allow you to go, there's like, these are common functions, common business type functions that people like to use. You can find them here. When you click on it, you'll see the DAX expression, and you just only have to fill in the blanks.
Okay, gotcha.
So, and then another thing that you can see here, maybe if you have an eagle eye, is you will see that there's actually things being hidden. So there is a difference between what is being shown on the matrix versus what's in the visual. If you look very closely, you'll see that the visual at the top only shows 2 bars. It only shows profit and RS profit. Those are the only 2 measures, only 2 numerical values that have been shown on that visual. All others still exist on the visual, matrix, but they're just being hidden. So that's not a concept that we're introducing.
So because you
Why
need,
are we doing this?
well, I was gonna say you need the data for the calculation. Yeah, so like you don't show it, but it's almost like the tooltip. Well, it is
Yes.
still calculated for the query. It's just not displayed. That way you can do a comparison or a profit or anything else that's needed for that calculation. Okay.
Right. So you can chunk your calculation in multiple pieces. You can build it slowly, and then only show the end result, or only show whatever the end result is that you really wanted. Those are like areas that we're thinking about and exploring. And to be very clear, those things will not only be there for this thing that we currently call visual calcs, but it will also, like the improvements that we're making to this DAX editor, and we're considering making, like with this plus sign and this highlighting and these drop down things, and potentially also the FX button, that will also come for general DAX, right? So it's not just, only in this magic new experience. That will eventually also make its way. Again, same conversation we had before. Band-Aid versus good solution, right?
Yep.
Would we change and reinvent the DAX editor just for this thing we call visual calcs, or would we just also then bring that to the general measure editing and calc column editing experience? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. We need to do that as well.
I've noticed quite a bit of a redesign as well in the fields pane. Like it looks cool, but it's also like, oh man, I just spent a week updating like hundreds of slides with the new Fields pane that finally came out of preview in like June. So hopefully, at least I have like 6 to 12 months before this potential redesign hits the market again. It's a
You'll
double-edged
have a little
sword.
bit of time,
Yeah, go ahead.
and also, I mean, this was created a while back, right? So this might already, like, this is a mock-up, so it took whatever was live then and just
That's
basically
fair.
tweaked the things that we wanted to tweak. So don't get overly excited about things that might not even align with what's there
True,
today.
true. Yeah.
Um, so I'm just pointing out to you the kind of the things that we are actually considering here as changes. So that would then allow you to build calculations later in the pipeline only on the data set, only on the aggregated data that you actually need, which in this case is like 2 weeks so 2 week numbers a day for every day in the week, so 14,
Mm-hmm.
and then 2 columns of data, and that's it, right? Pre-aggregated numbers, that's where we add these calculations on.
I'm really digging it though, and I think because you mentioned that you're trying to make it UI driven, for sure, and I can see this existing for both worlds. The pro developer is just never going to use this because they already have the skills in DAX, and you can create a measure that can be used hundreds of times versus like this is a sandbox environment. Each visual has its own, but I'm going to guess there's no button to say migrate this calculation back to the model, create a measure off of it to use somewhere else. It's probably would in theory just exist for this visual. So I think this gives a lot of power to self-taught individuals who are getting started and wanting to create calculations without having to take a 3-day course in learning how to write DAX. This will be,
Well,
I can see this existing in
yeah,
between. It's not for the person who is absolutely, wet behind the ears. They're familiar enough with Power BI to start wanting advanced calculations, but they haven't quite gotten to the point to take a course by Marco or something yet to actually learn how to write
right.
the necessary things. So this seems to me like as a Lego piece to fit kind of in the middle between those environments.
Yeah, and also the reason we've been very cautious about sharing this so far is because there's a loads of open questions still, right? And you just touched upon one, right? What does it mean for this calculation to live on that visual? Does it then only live on that visual ever? Or can it also somehow escape that? So we could promote reuse or even move into a model measure. What would that even mean? Would then the
That
running
would make it a
sum?
lot more powerful if it could do that.
Yes, but what
Well,
does that mean,
yeah,
right? Can we
yeah.
guarantee that for everything you can do in a visual, you can actually build that into a model measure? No,
And that's why I'm
because
not wondering if it could ever even do that. Is like you said, there's so many considerations for this visual that it will hard code like week number. But as soon as you add that to something else
right,
that's by month, like how can you explain to it and how can it ask what is the business logic that actually needs to be converted? So I can maybe see some
right,
certain visual calculations. Like let's just assume somebody tries to do a really basic one, like actuals minus budget. If there is no
right,
additional filter context that's coming in, it's just A minus B. I could see that as like, oh yeah, this is you can say this to your model. Like there's nothing, there's no
right.
complications that will prevent reuse. But something more like this, I can almost see like a pop-up like this is too context specific for this visual. I can't really translate this to a universal, calculation. Or if I do, it's going to have a very long name where this is running total by weekday, and like it's a, you know,
Yeah,
it makes it very clear by the
yeah,
title of the measure. This needs to be used for this exact visualization with these fields.
right. So that's things we have to think about and consider and work through. That's why we've been talking about this amongst ourselves for a long time, and we've been hesitant to share this forward or publicly. Um, so yeah, there's loads of things that we still have to iron out and think about and fill in the blanks. And keep in mind, right? I'm not announcing a new feature. I'm just showing you a potential future direction in which this can go, right? For all we know, this might end up somewhere and we will be replaced by something that doesn't look like this. What is a given is that we will invest into making DAX easier. There's no question about that. And currently, this is our prime candidate for that. Um, but I'm not telling you like, hey, stay tuned and next month
Yep.
there will be a button that you can click to make this happen. No, 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 no. That's not the level that we are at, right? We're just sharing
Yep.
this is a potential future direction that we're taking and thinking about and designing and working through with these heavy lifters in the product at this moment.
And just to paraphrase what you're mentioning, and also just to summarize some of the questions from this is, a few people are asking, is this separate from DAX? It's still DAX. It is all just concept. Like
Yes.
these are ideas of how it could look, but it would be DAX with potentially new functions specifically for visual level calculations. But this is all still being translated to the engine
Right.
as, it's still a DAX query being ran to produce a number into the visual. It also would, any new data that's added here, it still works with a filter pane with slicers, so those numbers would still change, still resulting in a final query that is being ran that interacts with everything that you have on the page, just like any other normal calculation would.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
So we're not
go ahead.
inventing a new language. We're not,
Mm-hmm.
all of your training, all of your books, everything that you know right now, it will still continue to work. It's not like we're going to build, I don't know, Power BI language. I don't know. Let's have we have M, we have DAX. Let's do P. I don't know. No, we're not doing that. Right? It's just DAX.
Yep.
But we're thinking, what does it mean to make DAX easier, and what are the things that we can do? And that's basically what is happening here.
I agree. I think we'll do. There's one question that I think works in conjunction with this a little bit, and I forget the name of it, but this came out recently because the question's around debugging and seeing things in between. Technically, Tabular Editor now has like a type of debugger. It's not a true debugging tool, but it is something that helps with that. And was there not a function that somebody blogged about recently, a new function that they saw in DAX that lets you kind of debug the code a little bit? It's I feel like somebody accidentally exposed it, but they just discovered it, like looking, because there's no documentation on it. But there is a new function somewhere, I thought, that lets you dig into the code a bit.
Yep. That function exists, and it's called evaluate and log.
Thank you. I was trying to remember the name of that because I was trying to Google just like earlier in the stream what that was, and I could not remember the function, so therefore I could not find the original post on that. But a couple
No,
people
it's
have blogged
evaluate.
about this.
Yeah, and it already went out in August in the desktop release. The reason why we haven't blogged about it is because the IntelliSense isn't ready. So you can type this function today and use it successfully. And if you go to Jeffrey Wang's blog, you will find how exactly. The reason why you haven't read about it on blog.powerbi.com is because simply we're not planning we're not blogging about features that don't have IntelliSense. So if I do a DAX function doesn't have IntelliSense yet, simply because that work wasn't done yet, because the people that need to do that were, I'm not allowed to blog about it, right? So I need to wait until the IntelliSense is done. So that's why evaluate and log has been there that you've not seen, and that's the reason. And so it will be announced when the IntelliSense is there, and then we will explain to you exactly how to use it. So that's definitely one. Funny enough, there's another one that you might not have ever heard of, which is already in the product. But again, because of IntelliSense not being ready, we haven't blogged about it. And that's called a function called offset.
Yeah, I think I saw it was Johnny Winter. There was someone who tweeted earlier like, "Hey, there's a new thing that's doing something. Is this similar to like maybe it's like some similar things in Excel that they've seen as well?" But I've seen people get
Yes.
excited about that. But yeah, there's no pop-up that explains what it does. But if you type it correctly, it does evaluate. It turns blue and it lets you actually use it.
Yes, it absolutely does that. It will show you red squiggly lines, but you need to know what you need to type in. But what offset does is like the Excel function for offset. It's not the same function, by the way. So it's not what I just said that we just slap in whatever Excel did. That's not what we did. But we will. What this will allow you to do is actually contextually look at where you are in the visual that you're currently building, or where you are in the visual that the measure is being executed in,
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, let's say I'm in the third row of a matrix. I want to get the value that is right above me. I don't care what it is, right? I know it's, for example, sales amount. Let me just get the sales amount right above me. I don't care if that's like um, last year or like last week. That depends on the context, but I can just do a relative movement from my current position to another place. So that's something
Okay.
that is there and that we slipped in under the radar, even the people with SQL BI. So they haven't updated their dex.guide yet because they didn't know about it. Well, they knew about the function coming in, but not that it was going to ship. So we slipped it in. So if you start typing that and you get the parameters right, you can actually make that work.
So it's similar to the earlier function that used to be used before like variables and other stuff started getting declared, but like where you could basically go to previous row or previous X number of rows. But in your
Yes.
case, this is I want to use like it's from the query context. Whatever you're grouping by, like columns slash rows, whatever the earlier one is, you can go back one, two, or three. So that's I mean, in terms of some calculations, that might be a lot simpler to use that than trying to do like fancy prior periods or other stuff, which depending on your scenario and what the data is, it might just be easier to say go back one rather than trying to figure out exactly
Yep.
how to go back to that other previous like custom calendar period or something.
Exactly. And that's kind of like where we're thinking and where we're moving towards with that offset function, and we'll add way more than that soon. So that all of that will be revealed. Same as this will be revealed once we're ready and we know where we're going for real with this. We'll definitely talk more about that and share more on the various channels. So I just wanted to share this as part of like, hey, here's where we're going, and we and
Hmm.
and and also to get feedback and get people thinking about it and
Yeah.
excited. Um, and if there's feedback on this channel right now in this live chat, feel free. Let me know what you think. If you are skeptical, I mean, of course, if you love it, I would love to know. But I'm more interested in being skeptical, to be honest, because the moment somebody is skeptical about something that I work on, I learn the most, right? Because apparently I missed something.
Hmm. I
So
I do
yeah,
have one, I think, final question is just that's I think the good way to wrap up at least the evaluate and log thing that we were talking about a little bit is Didier wanted to know your opinion on just how you think this might help not novices, non-experienced users, the ones that like probably need more help with DAX than say people who are already familiar with say DAX Studio or Tabular Editor.
right. Um, I'd be tempted to say that it's only for the people that actually know what code development means. Because to me,
Hmm.
evaluate and log is actually just a print statement, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like if you go in Python or you go into C and you have sprintf, right? That's basically what this thing is. It's basically whatever you pass in, I'll just print. So, your beginner user, I immediately think about a person feeling comfortable in Excel. Will they make the mental jump to go like, oh, but there's a print function and that can actually output something to the screen? I'm
Yeah, yeah.
doubtful. I don't think that will be their immediate mental model, right? I think
Yeah.
they would more be happy with what I just showed. Is like, hey, I can type this and I can immediately see what it's doing. And I can immediately look at the result right there on the screen without me having to do trickery to make that go and make that happen, right? So I think this evaluator log is great. It's especially great for people that are in this kind of middle ground between, having the DAX debugger and having access to Tabular Editor 3, of course, um, which is miles ahead of the evaluate and log experience. Let me be very clear. But this is maybe the poor man's version of DAX debugger for the ones that don't have access to that yet or don't know what that is,
Yep.
but are above this like low ground. Because I don't believe that new users that look at DAX for the first time will easily discover this and make that
No, no, no.
mental
Yeah.
jump of like I can actually print this.
What I'm hope like a nice like perfect world vision that I see someday, considering now as well that you guys have brought on Darren and everything, with and like DAX Studio is still a separate thing, but having kind of a button that doesn't just open DAX Studio, but if there's a way to ever like be able to click on a visual or even go to the performance analyzer section, click on that. and it automatically takes the query, opens it up in DAX Studio, shows maybe the printed log, like making it less clicks to get to that evaluation. That I like a tighter integration like that. I do think for those novice people who don't know how to, the proper way to copy and paste and do all that, and especially now with DAX Studio 3, which he will be demoing at the end of this month. I can see that making it easier for those people who are less
Right.
experienced with the advanced stuff, because they don't need to know the code. They want to know
Right.
what's happening, the sequence and all that, if
Yes.
they truly want to fix something.
Agreed.
So I can imagine that kind of stuff
Agreed.
being better going forward.
Yep.
But otherwise, this has been fantastic. I do know there's a few still outstanding questions, but timing considerations that I also have to get rid of for the airport. I will wrap up at this point. But loved the chat today. It was great hanging out and just being able to talk shop about a lot of the stuff with the development, just all the different roles that you've had in the company, and also some of the projects and initiatives that you've been involved in. And I think for myself and people tuning in, it's always nice to see and hear the inside story between a lot of the stuff on not only like, hey, we do continuously try to hear feedback, but there is many considerations into prioritization and everything else. So I think
Yep.
it's good to give exposure to the community on the inner workings on how things are decided, if and when, and then also why things take so long. So that's always good to
Yep.
be able to have those conversations for sure.
Well, I mean, thanks for having me, and
Yeah.
it's always a pleasure. And if there's any point in time you want me back for something like that, sure. And if there's more to share about where this thing is taking us, we'll definitely reach out and make sure we get on
Yep.
every virtual and physical stage that we can get to. So I'll
Absolutely,
definitely
yeah.
be knocking on your door. And
Please,
no,
yeah.
I appreciate you doing this for the community as well, and it's just a great way for us to share the other side of the world and not just only the marketing materials. So
Exactly.
definitely appreciate you doing that, and definitely appreciate you tuning in and being active. I'll go rewatch and look at the comments, see if there's anything that jumps out to me that we might have missed. So even that feedback doesn't get lost.
Perfect. And yeah, I'd happily have you back on again at some point. And Tenacious Data, I just wanted to mention that you're +1 in the background as well. The sleepy puppy that's just hanging out in the chair.
Yep, that's Leo, our husky, and he just loves being
Yep.
with me here in my little shed in the yard that I redid and make it look like a cabin feel. This was like a garden shed where they stored like lawnmowers, right? And we gave it a roof and actual like insulation and everything, a floor. So this is now my dedicated working space, and Leo just loves hanging out with me there, as you can see.
That was one of the comments from much earlier in the day, but it's like, just a side note, I love all the cabin aesthetic and the natural wood everywhere. It feels very cozy. So,
Yep. Well, there's still,
yeah.
you can see it's still a work in progress, right? There's still a
Yep.
couple of green stripes behind me.
Yep.
So there's like, it's not entirely finished, but we'll get there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day and, relaxing from getting back from your conference. And I will now jet over to mine in Europe as well.
Good luck, safe travels, and enjoy that conference in Billund. And chances are that Will, who's gonna show up there as
Oh, yeah.
representative from the product team, will actually show something about visual calcs in there.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, looking forward to that too. Cool.
Cool. Okay. See you later. Thanks all.
All right. Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.